The stars were no longer distant points of light. They were coordinates, mapped, analyzed, and weighed for potential. Humanity had, at last, stumbled out of its cradle, not in a triumphant march, but in a desperate, measured crawl. Earth, bloated by centuries of careless expansion, had begun to choke on its own legacy. Oceans rose, food supplies dwindled, and the air thickened with pollutants too complex to filter completely. The answer, to those bold enough to fund and build it, lay not in fixing the planet, but in abandoning it. Arcadia was not the first colony. It was the sixth, but it was the first to be fully independent from Earth's supply chain, a true test of humanity's ability to start over. The planet, designated HX, 79L but unofficially dubbed Giles after the astronomer who found it, was small, temperate, and rich in rare metals. Most importantly, it had breathable air after a century of automated terraforming. The mission's architect, Commander Elias Rowe, was neither the youngest nor the most idealistic of Earth's elite. He was a man selected for his pragmatism and nerves of steel, qualities that had earned him both a stellar reputation and a string of quiet enemies in the bureaucracies behind the mission. He stood before the viewport of the colony's Central Command Dome now, eyes narrowed at the dust-streaked horizon where dawn spilled like molten copper across Giles's unfamiliar soil. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. It was Dr. Leona Voss, lead environmental scientist, and arguably the conscience of the operation. "They're almost finished unloading the last of the cryopods," she said. "All 3,000 colonists are accounted for." Elias nodded. "And the reactors?" "Stable. For now." The pause between them lingered. Leona stepped closer, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, her voice lowering. "You still haven't told them what we found in Sector 7. Elias turned sharply. "And I won't. Not yet. But they need to know, if that soil sample is accurate, we're sitting on a geological fault line with seismic readings spiking over the last 12 hours. We don't even know if it's active. I'm not compromising morale over a hypothesis." Leona's jaw clenched, but she said nothing more. She walked out with quick, purposeful steps, her lab coat whipping behind her like a flag of defiance. Down in the commons, the colony buzzed with a cautious optimism. Families emerged from their assigned units with tentative smiles, children clutching stuffed animals that had been cryo-packed with greater care than some of the medical equipment. Engineers in dust-marked suits ran checks on the solar arrays, while drones hovered overhead like guardian insects. The air smelled faintly of copper and ozone, a sharp contrast to the thick, synthetic atmosphere they'd trained in back on Earth. Among them walked Mace Talon, Chief Systems Officer, a former corporate security analyst who had transitioned into colonial infrastructure. Mace wore pragmatism like armor, and his distrust of centralized leadership had already earned him a quiet following among the colonists. He was good at listening, better at remembering what people didn't say. He paused outside the water reclamation unit, eyeing the fluctuation in the system's diagnostics. A red blink that shouldn't have been there. Minor, yes, but not meaningless. "You see this?" he asked, gesturing to a nearby engineer, Elva Tran. Elva frowned. "Might be the filters adjusting to mineral levels in the groundwater. This planet's got strange trace elements." Strange doesn't mean safe. Log it. Cross-reference it with the last 48 hours of environmental data. Quietly, Elva nodded, tension entering her brow. Back in the command dome, Elias watched the latest supply manifest flicker across the screen. Everything looked normal, on paper, yet a weight settled deeper on his shoulders with each passing hour. Leadership was never about the absence of fear. It was about knowing when to share it. That evening, the colony gathered in the central hall for the official first-day ceremony. Light strings flickered overhead. A local band, hastily formed from the musically inclined, plucked out a passable rendition of an old Earth hymn. The mood was hopeful, if strained. Elias stepped onto the stage. He did not wear a uniform. He believed command should walk beside its people, not above them. "Today," he began, "we begin again. Arcadia isn't just a colony. It's our answer to every doubt that ever said humanity couldn't change. Every mistake we made on Earth brought us here, not as punishment, but as potential. Applause rippled through the crowd, but Leona didn't clap. She stood in the back, arms crossed. Mace, farther left, didn't smile either. We will build, Elias continued. We will endure, and we will not repeat history. Not here. The irony wasn't lost on them. Already, history was stirring beneath their feet. Fault lines literal and metaphorical. The celebration tapered off into tired murmurs. Colonists returned to their quarters. Lights dimmed. The world exhaled. 2 hours after midnight, the first tremor hit. It was minor, enough to rattle dishes and knock over a few external sensors, but was enough. Leona sat bolt upright in her bunk, her console already blinking with seismic data. Mace, wide awake from routine insomnia, called an alert before the second aftershock followed 10 minutes later. Elias was in the dome when the reports came in. He didn't speak at first. He simply stared at the screen. Sector 7. A fault line. Buried deep, deeper than they'd expected. A stress buildup that could shatter the terrain like glass. And more importantly, the colony's east reactor was situated directly over it. He hit the comms. Dr. Voss, Mace, I need both of you in control now. When they arrived, breathless and grim, Elias pointed to the readouts. You were right, he said to Leona, voice tight. How bad? She hesitated. The fault's length indicates a potential for a magnitude 7 quake, maybe higher. If it hits, we lose the east grid. That's half our energy, water, and all cryostorage. Mace finished. Options. Relocate the reactor. But that would take weeks. We don't have the time or manpower. Or, Mace hesitated, we shut down the east sector temporarily. Run the whole colony off west grid. It'll strain everything, especially climate control. Elias paced, then stopped. What happens if we keep everything running? Leona didn't blink. We risk catastrophic failure. We risk lives. There it was. The moment when a decision wasn't just technical, it was existential. Do you strain a fragile system and test human endurance? Or do you cut power and bring discomfort to 3,000 people who just survived interstellar transit and a frozen sleep that nearly stopped their hearts? Give me a minute, Elias said. They stepped out. Alone, Elias stared at the map of his colony. Red lines, green lights, pulsing data points. All of it supposed to represent control. Yet he could feel it slipping already. He tapped the console. Computer, begin Scenario 7 analysis. The AI chirped. Warning. Scenario 7 contains a 42% risk of colony-wide infrastructure failure. Run it anyway. The simulation unfolded. Power rerouting. Temporary heat loss. Food yield drop. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't scream. They didn't show the faces of children waking to frostbitten air or of parents wondering if they'd made the biggest mistake of their lives. But if they didn't risk it, the quake would do worse. Much worse. The cold crept in slowly, like a whispered threat. Over the next 2 days, temperatures in the eastern sector dropped by 9 degrees Celsius. Not enough to freeze pipes, but enough to draw panic. Breath became visible in the residential halls. Fingers stiffened. Condensation formed inside the biodomes, setting off a chain of microclimate issues that would have been minor under normal power distribution. But nothing about Arcadia was normal anymore. Elias watched the metrics slide. Battery reserves dipped below 40%. West Grid couldn't keep up. Portable heaters ran on emergency loops, and every extra, what was rationed like water in a desert. He sent out a message to the colony, an honest report but carefully framed. We're managing a temporary energy redistribution. Full stability expected within 72 hours. Remain indoors. Follow thermal conservation protocols. We are in this together. The words sounded firm, reassuring, but they were also a gamble. People began to whisper. Dr. Voss had taken up permanent residence in the environmental control lab. She didn't sleep much. Her team rotated in 4-hour shifts, managing the chaotic fluctuations in the greenhouse systems. Crops wilted under poor light and sharp temperature swings. Leaf edges curled. Molds took hold in hydroponic channels. It was a quiet death, this kind. Slow, deliberate. She logged everything, muttering to herself in clipped fragments. Red lettuce colonies failing. Basil, too much humidity. Tomato vines, losing grip. She started talking to the plants, a habit born of stress and a scientist's strange empathy. Her hands shook as she typed, not from cold, but from the sense that everything she designed was slipping through her fingers. Meanwhile, Mace Talon had stopped reporting through official channels. He built his own network, engineers, technicians, utility workers, those who saw the glitches first. He called them the patch crew. Not a rebellion, not yet, but an unofficial safety net. When power lines and habitation block force started to pulse, it was Mace's crew who rerouted circuits by hand. When 3 heating units caught fire from a short-circuit control board, they cut the feed before emergency systems even noticed. Elias didn't stop him. He didn't encourage him, either. The 2 men hadn't spoken in person since the shutdown. Every conversation now passed through intermediaries, technicians, assistants, layered messages. Distance grew like a hairline crack in a pressure dome. The colonists began to gather in the commons, even when they weren't supposed to. Instinct drew them together. Cold made them huddle in packs. In the absence of information, speculation flourished. Some blamed the reactor team. Others said there was never enough power to begin with. A few whispered that the quake wasn't natural at all, that something had been found in Sector 7 that changed the command's priorities. A month into the shutdown, the first colonist died. It was officially ruled hypothermia, complicated by respiratory stress. The man, a botanist named Janos Kale, had lived alone. His thermal unit malfunctioned. He filed 3 maintenance requests. None were answered in time. Elias ordered an investigation. Mace published a public statement. The system failed Janos. But more importantly, the system is lying to us. We are not stable. We are not improving. And we need a plan, one that doesn't depend on reassurances, but on facts. His words spread like flame. People began asking questions in public. Town halls filled. Arguments erupted. Elias responded with increased transparency. Daily status reports, thermal distribution maps, resource inventories. But the damage was done. Authority that must explain itself too often begins to sound desperate. That same week, the water purification unit flagged a contamination spike. It started with a bacterial bloom in the filtration membrane. Something never predicted. Something Earth Labs hadn't encountered. At first, it was minor, an uptick in gastrointestinal symptoms, easily treated. Then 3 children developed sepsis. The colony's single med dome was not prepared for pediatric intensive care. Supplies ran out faster than they could be rationed. 1 child survived. 2 did not. Leona sat in a debriefing with red-rimmed eyes, her tone brittle. This is what happens when systems are overstressed. Biointegrity collapses. You can't treat a colony like a machine, Elias. It's an ecosystem. It breaks if pushed too hard. We had no choice, he answered. It was that or lose everyone to quake. But we're losing them anyway. Silence closed around them. Outside the dome, a group of colonists had formed a vigil near the damaged purification system. They lit glow sticks in the shape of the children's names. Someone had painted a sign, and no more silent failures. That night, an unauthorized transmission pulsed through the internal comms network. It wasn't an address. It was a recording, a meeting, 2 weeks old. Elias, speaking to the AI, running disaster models. The clip ended on his voice saying, "We do it anyway. We shut down East and pray they're strong enough to survive it." There were no lies in the recording, only context, stripped from time and weaponized by grief. The next morning, 47 colonists refused work duty. By afternoon, Mace visited Elias directly. "You need to step down," he said. Elias sat behind his console, unmoved. "You don't get to make that decision. The people already have. They just haven't acted on it yet. But they will. And when they do, it won't be quiet." "Is this a coup?" Mace hesitated. "This is a correction. You made a choice. Maybe the only choice. But you're not the one they trust to make the next one. I never asked to be liked." "No, but you forgot to be listened to." Mace left without waiting for a reply. Leona found Elias an hour later. He was still sitting in the same position. "You should talk to them," she said. He didn't answer. "They want answers, Elias. Not policies. Not models. Answers. What should I say? That I gambled and lost? That I did what every training scenario told me to avoid, and it killed children?" Leona walked to the window, arms folded. "You tell them the truth. You say that you're human." Elias looked up, voice raw. "They don't want a human. They want a hero. Or a villain." "Well," she said, "you're the only one who volunteered to be either." Outside, a storm was gathering over the southern ridge. Not seismic, atmospheric. Unstable winds, unpredictable lightning. A freak pattern, spinning fast toward the central grid. The forecast estimated landfall within 48 hours. If it hit the Western Dome, Arcadia's last intact power system, they would lose everything. Elias closed his eyes. It wasn't over, but it would be soon. The storm touched down before dawn, a boiling wall of wind and electrical fury that rolled in from the southern highlands with no warning beyond a sudden shift in barometric pressure and screamed to the comms. "All units brace. Impact incoming." In the control dome, Elias stood alone, watching the sky fracture. The lightning was unnatural, red-veined, spiraling, like some atmospheric wound had been torn open. Static buzz in his earpiece. And for a moment all the data feeds flickered out. Then the West Dome went dark. The heartbeat of the colony flatlined. Leona's voice came through on a backup channel, ragged and barely intelligible. "Elias, the grid, it's gone. The whole array blew. Main capacitors melted." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. It was already happening. Lights across Arcadia blinked out in sequence, cascading like falling dominoes. One by one, life support systems ceased. Heaters died. Water pumps stuttered, then fell silent. Even the emergency AI core flickered, losing its synthetic calm. Within 5 minutes, the entire colony dropped into primitive silence. By midday, the temperature inside the residential sectors had fallen below 5 degrees Celsius. The makeshift shelters built in the commons filled fast. Tents of mylar and polymer sheets, lit by the dim blue of portable lanterns. Mace took command, not by demand but necessity. He directed engineers to scavenge remaining thermal units, redistributed them among the youngest and oldest. Everyone worked. Everyone bled heat. Leona coordinated the medical teams, now operating from a converted hydroponics bay. The only warmth there came for what little the remaining crops gave off. A bitter irony, considering how few had survived. Supplies dwindled hourly. And in the dead silence of Control Dome, Elias remained. He didn't move when the hatch hissed open. May stepped in, brushing snow dust from his jacket. "You're still here," May said. It wasn't a question. Elias didn't look at him. "I started this here. I end it here. We need power, and we need it now. There's no grid. There's an auxiliary node buried under the southern ridge," May said, stepping closer. "The old Terraformer bank. Your engineers sealed it after landing." Elias blinked slowly. "That system wasn't tested. The conduits aren't shielded. If we fire it, it might overload," Mace finished, "or it might save us." Elias turned to him fully now. For the first time in weeks, something returned to his expression. Focus. We'd need a manual link. Someone to activate on-site. "I know," May said. They both knew what that meant. The ridge was for kilometers through open terrain. Terrain now buried under toxic snow and whipped by winds sharp enough to skin exposed flesh. Even with a suit, the odds were narrow. Elias spoke first. "I'll go." May shook his head. "You're not exactly the colony's favorite right now. All the more reason. Let me do something right. You're not expendable, Elias. I am if it means 3,000 people live." Silence stretched between them. Then May slowly reached into his coat and withdrew a thick sheath of folded mylar. "Suits in the West Locker. Go before they know you're gone." Elias nodded once, quietly, and turned to leave. Outside, the storm hadn't abated, but the worst gusts had passed. The world was white raw and soundless but for the crunch of his boots and the mechanical wheeze of his breath. The suit insulated well enough to delay the inevitable, but not stop it. His visor fogged quickly, even with the vent filters at maximum. Time was short. He followed a half-buried path, marked with faded waypoints and blinking drones now half dead from the grid failure. His mind cataloged each step, every intake of breath, as if he could control the chaos with discipline alone. Memories emerged, his first briefing on Arcadia, the long months in cryo, the faces of families chosen by lottery, trained for years to be settlers, now huddled in cold. They hadn't signed up to suffer. Not like this. 2 kilometers in, the winds picked up again. He dropped to one knee behind a jagged outcropping, shielding himself from a barrage of ice. His gloved fingers trembled. Power reserves in the suit blinked amber. Another kilometer. He could see the access point now, half buried in snow. A black hatch, glinting beneath frost, embedded in the slope like a scar. His pace quickened, legs screaming, lungs pulling cold like broken glass. He reached the hatch and slammed a glove palm onto the override. The door hissed, resisting, then jerked open with a shriek of frozen gears. He stumbled inside, collapsed against the warm metal, and tore off the helmet with a gasp. The chamber within was intact, old but functional. Dust layered every surface, untouched since landfall. Console lights blinked, waiting. He powered it up. The hum was deep, almost subterranean. The node's AI blinked awake, its voice hoarse from years of silence. Terraformer auxiliary control active. Please input command sequence. Elias keyed in the emergency bypass. Warning, the AI said, this action will reroute core power. Structural failures likely. I know, Elias said. He pulled a manual release and shoved the main throttle forward. Back in the colony, lights flickered. First in the commons, lanterns dimming as overhead strips surged to life. Then in Med Dome, where Leona looked up mid-injection and whispered, "Oh my God!" Batteries surged. Systems rebooted. The grid came online. And Elias, he sat slumped against the console, suit vents hissing steam into the small chamber. His breath was shallow. The temperature in the room stabilized, but his core body heat did not. He looked down at his fingers, blue at the edges. He reached for the comm switch, thumbed it once. This is Elias Row. The power's on. Keep them safe. The transmission cut there. An hour later, a rescue team arrived. Mace at the front, suit caked in frost. They found Elias unconscious, post-ready, skin pale, but alive. They carried him back in silence. Arcadia lived. For now, Elias awoke to warmth. Not the manufactured, clinical heat of Arcadia's thermal vents, but the comforting embrace of thick blankets, the murmur of voices, the scent of brewed roots and antiseptic. He blinked, sluggish, vision hazy. The overhead lights were soft, filtered, a medical dome, alive. He turned his head with effort. Leona sat beside him, elbows on knees, exhausted but alert. Her hair was tied back in a mess of loops, her cheeks sallow with worry. She noticed him stir and lean closer, expression unreadable. "You made it," she said, her voice carefully steady. "Not alone," he rasped. "No," she replied. "Never alone. That's the part you forget." He tried to sit up, winced as a tremor surged through his torso. Leona pressed a hand to his chest. "Don't push it. You were hypothermic. Severe. We stabilized you, but you'll need time." He closed his eyes, but not from pain. From something heavier. "How many?" he asked quietly. She knew what he meant. "Too many," she answered, "but fewer than we feared." The backup system held. Crops survived. Water's clean again. The babies are warm. He let the silence stretch, absorbing the impossible weight of survival. Arcadia lived. And for the first time in weeks, the phrase didn't sound like a lie. Outside, the colony stirred with cautious energy. Lights remained dim to conserve power, but they stayed on. Teams moved with purpose, repairing circuits, distributing supplies, clearing debris. Children were outside again, bundled in oversized jackets, chasing each other between snowdrifts. The storm had shifted something beyond infrastructure. It had forced truth into the open, stripped away false certainty. And from that vulnerability, something sturdier was forming. Unity not imposed by authority, but chosen through hardship. Elias walked again after 3 days. Slowly, one arm in a sling, lungs still weak. But he refused a stretcher. Leona didn't argue. Mace met them at the solar fields, where the first batch of repair panels was being reinstalled. He wore a patched coat and grease-streaked gloves, his beard thicker than before, his expression tempered by too many sleepless nights. "Morning," he said. "Barely," Elias muttered, coughing. Mace cracked a faint smile. "You always did time your miracles late." They stood for a moment, letting the sun, muted by cloud cover, wash over them, grids holding steady. Mace said, "More stable now than it ever was, thanks to rerouting through the Terraformer system. Funny, isn't it? The tech we ignored ended up saving us." "It was designed to be last resort," Elias said. "Well, we ran out of everything else." Leona adjusted her scarf, looking from one man to the other. "So what now?" Mace sighed. "We rebuild. We monitor. We keep asking hard questions. And we stop pretending any one of us has all the answers." Elias nodded faintly. "Then I should step down." Leona looked at him sharply. "What?" He turned to her, then to Mace. "You were right. I made a call, one that fractured us. People followed orders, but they stopped believing in them. They need more than a command figure. They need a council, shared leadership." Mace didn't answer immediately. "You're sure this isn't guilt talking?" "Guilt kept me alive," Elias said. "But this is clarity." By nightfall, the announcement had been made. Arcadia would transition from central command to a council structure, 5 members, chosen by a mix of expertise and democratic vote. Mace accepted the engineering seat. Leona, reluctantly, took environmental systems. A lead agriculturist, a logistics officer, and a schoolteacher filled the remaining roles. Elias declined a position. He chose to serve quietly as an advisor. Nothing more. In the days that followed, things didn't return to normal. They couldn't. But something better began to take shape. Systems redesigned with redundancy in mind. Communication lines opened fully to all colonists. Education programs restructured to include disaster readiness. Children drew pictures of the storm, and a man in a suit standing alone at the edge of the world, powering it all back on. One evening, Elias stood alone at the boundary of the eastern perimeter, where the cracked earth still bore the tremors of the quake. Wind scraped over jagged stone. The air was thin but breathable. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Footsteps behind him. "Mace, you planning on walking into the dust and vanishing?" "Tempting," Elias said without turning. "Well, too bad. You're still needed." Elias opened his eyes. "You're managing fine." Mace stood beside him, hands in his pockets. "We're surviving. Because of what you did. Because of what you broke and then helped rebuild. I ruined a colony." "No," Mace said. "You reminded it could fail. And then you showed it how to rise." Elias didn't reply. Not right away. He looked out across the expanse, scarred, cold, unyielding. But somewhere beneath that dust, life was growing again, roots threading through rock. Hope seated in soil not meant to nurture. Arcadia would never be what it was. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it would be something better. The stars blinked to life overhead, one by one, uncaring, ancient, distant. But below them, the colony endured, a stubborn spark against the void. And in that light, Elias Rowe finally allowed himself to believe.